Okay, so Unit 3, the early Republic era. And in this unit's going to last from 1789 to 1824. And the first thing we're going to be talking about in this unit is our first president, or POTUS, which stands for President of the United States, a term that is actually used today. The first POTUS, George Washington. So today we're going to be talking about our first POTUS, George Washington. Okay, everyone solid? 1789 all the way through 1824. So we're going to be talking about our first 5 presidents in this unit, and we'll move on from there. So Unit 3, let's talk about George Washington today. Now in this first image, folks, I want you to just see if you can point out, of these 5 individuals, which of these individuals is George Washington?
The one standing up with the cane.
Yeah, this guy. That's George Washington. So who might be these other 3 men? So raise your hand and tell me who you think these other people might be. So Omar, any guesses?
The guy saying I think is Benjamin Franklin.
So maybe this guy's Benjamin Franklin. Remember, Benjamin Franklin was 81 at the Constitutional Convention, and that was in 87. So he'd be 83 right now if that was Benjamin Franklin. John Adams. Why John Adams? He's the vice president, so yeah, John Adams would be a very good guess for who that person might be, because he's vice president at the time. Good. So that is John Adams, actually. Does anyone know who this guy is?
Thomas Jefferson.
That's Thomas Jefferson. Does anyone know who this guy is?
Madison?
No. You'll meet him later. Oh, my mistake. That's not John Adams. That's some other guy. We'll talk about him in a second. Okay, so a few things first that we should note. America in the 1790s. America in the 1790s. What do you notice about the population of America as it goes from the 1790s all the way to today? Yes, actually, the population of America begins doubling every 25 years. So the population of America doubles every 25 years, and that's a trend that still exists today. Every 25 years, the population of the United States almost doubled, which is actually quite impressive. Still, the vast majority of these people were still living where? Many of them were still living along the East Coast, and most of these people were also living on what? Were they living in cities?
No.
Where were they living?
Farms.
90% of the population is still agricultural. So even though most people are living on the East Coast still, about 90% of the population is still living on farms, agriculture of some sort or another. In terms of cities that are growing at this time, you see the growth of cities emerging. The major cities that you guys should know are, of course, New York as one of the top cities, Philadelphia, Boston, Charleston, and Baltimore. You really only need to know the top 5 cities. But why might people be moving into cities? Jobs. I mean, ultimately, jobs. Because farming, it's great, but is farming very stable? No, right? Because your food might grow one year, but is it always going to grow every year? Why not?
Because it's depending on weather and
Yeah, weather, seasons might not be working out so well. And so farmers that fail, typically where do they go to? The cities to look for other kinds of jobs. Maybe they'll work on ships. Maybe they'll be shipbuilders. Maybe they'll be traders. But you have the growth of cities. And again, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Charleston, and Baltimore. And are these today still considered very populated cities? Yeah, and that's something that began back in the 1790s. So even in 1790, New York was already considered a bustling, populated city. Almost 1,000 years later, not 1,000 years, that's way too long. 200 years later, that's still something that's still pretty populated. Maybe by 2079, it'll still be very populated. That's my guess. So we're this new country, and the problem we have to ask ourselves now is, what were the problems of New America? We're brand new. We got a new constitution. From day one, we still have problems, though. What problems did we inherit? Victoria? Slavery is still a problem. So sure, you have this problem of slavery. That's still something that's going to be a problem. And that's going to be a problem between who? North and South. And we'll have tensions even from the very beginning between the North and the South. What else might still be considered a problem? Rudy.
The debt.
The debt. I mean, did the Articles of Confederation fix the debt problem? No. So do we now have to fix that problem with this new government? So that's definitely going to be another major problem we have to fix. We've been dealing with it since 1781. That debt's going to come with us now into 1787. So we have the problem of slavery, a political problem. We also have this major problem with the debt. Good so far? And remember, folks, we inherited that problem from the Articles of Confederation. Who inherited that problem from where? Yeah, where did the debt come from in the first place? The French Indian War, the American Revolution, the Boston Tea Party. I mean, this debt we just passed on and on and on and on. Eventually we'll pay it, don't worry. We'll pay that debt eventually. So the other major problems, you guys talked about the debt. That's a major problem. You also have a weak currency. We have a weak currency. Is America a new country? This new America?
Yeah.
Sure. And so do people trust us as a new country? It's like, hey, don't worry. I'll pay you in US dollars. They're like, US dollars? Is that anything like the Continental? Because the Continental was crap. But I don't think I'm going to want to use this new American dollar. So we have a weak currency, which makes it really hard to pay off our debts. Another major problem politically, like Victoria said, was slavery. But a third or fourth major problem with regard to politics is we have an unstable government. Guys, how many governments have we had in the last, I don't know, 20 years? 3 governments. 4 if you count colonial governments. So you had colonial self-government, dictatorial monarchy, a failed Articles of Confederation, now a US government. So if you're looking at America, politically, how stable are we? Not very stable. So that's another concern that we have, is that we have a very unstable government. So you have kind of this Jenga kind of a structure going on in the US government. And is everyone just expecting us to have this fail too? Let's wait for the 5th government to happen. So everyone's just waiting for us to fail because, guys, we're constantly changing government in the last 20 years. That's kind of crazy. So these are our problems. And these are the issues we're going to have to inherit. So enters George Washington, first POTUS, serving from 1789 to 1796. Folks, the first thing we should know about George Washington is when he was voted to be president, it was unanimous. It was unanimous. Who can raise their hand and tell me what unanimous means? When you elect someone to be president unanimously. Yeah, Marcelo. Everyone agreed that George Washington would be an excellent president. Everyone was like, yeah, George Washington. Because who else would we elect, right? Unifying figure, great guy, charismatic, upbeat, war hero. Why not George Washington? So George Washington is elected to be the first president of the United States. His vice president, by the way, is going to be who? John Adams. John Adams will be elected to be his vice president. Now, fun fact about this statue. You don't have to know this, but this is kind of interesting. This statue was made in 1841 to make George Washington look a lot like Zeus. It's actually based on one of the 7 wonders of the world. But many people actually decided to put the statue away in 1908 because they thought the statue was too sexy. They did. They thought, like, though many people thought that it was too sexy, it was too risque, like George Washington with the shirt off, his nipples showing. They're like, I don't know if we can have that on the Capitol lawn. We shouldn't have a sexy George Washington. That's not appropriate for children. And so they decided to take sexy George Washington, and now he's residing in the Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. So if you come with me to D.C., we'll be able to visit sexy George Washington. But again, they moved him in 1908 because they thought he was just too risque at the time, too sexy. They joked like, oh, here's George Washington asking for his clothes. Like, he's like, please give me my clothes. So his fingers up, demanding to put clothes on. In any case, George Washington. And as we know, George Washington. So, George Washington, here's what he did. One of the first things that happened with George Washington is that he was inaugurated as president. So at his inauguration celebration, what did he get to become? President. Because in order to be president, you have to be inaugurated. And at this inauguration, as president, what are you required to do? What is he doing right there? He has to take the oath of office, right? To execute the laws, whatever else. You don't get to be president and not take the oath of office. So there he's inaugurated. Now, another thing I want to point out to you is if you look at this picture, what types of people are here? Like, who's here, and more importantly, who's not here? So look at this picture quickly. Take about 10, 15 seconds. But look at who is present at this ceremony, and more importantly, who's not present. And I'm not talking about individuals, like, oh, that's Senator Rutledge, and that. I don't mean like individual peoples. I mean, who's present at this ceremony, and who's not present at this ceremony, more importantly. So, Gregory. His wife. So his wife was there, but she's not featured in this image. Yeah, so yes, Rudy. I'm not Rudy. Anthony? There's definitely no blacks. So there's obviously no blacks in this image. Definitely something to keep in mind. Daisy? Mostly wealthy, rich, elite. Kevin?
No women.
No women? Definitely no women as well. So again, this is George Washington getting to be president of the United States, and who gets to be there with him? Wealthy white men. So this is pretty much the beginning of our foundation of our country, right? And so remember how we talked about how we extended this democracy to everyone? Is that necessarily true always? No. And in fact, folks, are there lower class people here in this picture? Yes, there are. Yeah.
They're sitting down.
No?
Oh. Wasn't there a plan?
There are people like, yay, George Washington from the window. But do they actually get to go to the ceremony? No, because they're poor. We don't want them to be part of the ceremony. That's disturbing. Yes. Huh? This guy?
No. We're in the middle. Next to the right.
Oh, that guy?
Door.
Maybe he's like getting tea. He's thirsty. Maybe he dropped his glasses. This is not a photo. This is not like a photograph. That was done for a reason, though I don't know why. Maybe it was someone who died, someone that wasn't present. I don't know. Yeah, but because this is a painting, that is a really good reason. Why is this guy turned around? Because this is not a picture. This is something where they painted every single thing for a reason. So that's not a bad question. I just don't know the answer to it. But that is a good question. Find out. If you find out, let me know. All right. So one of the first things that George Washington does is he creates what is known as a presidential cabinet. Presidential cabinet is the first thing that George Washington does. And in this presidential cabinet, he creates three offices for his secretaries. He has the Secretary of, who can name all the first three secretaries? Secretary of State, sure.
Treasurer.
Secretary of Treasury. Not Secretary of Defense yet. We changed that later. That's after World War II. It's Secretary of War. So, Secretary of State is who? Does anyone remember who Secretary of State is? Not Hamilton. I'll give you a hint. He wrote the Declaration of Independence. TJ, Thomas Jefferson. He is our Secretary of State. So one way to remember that, folks, is that he wrote the Declaration of Independence, and that audience was the world, right? So he's very big on worldly ideas. He's very big on... By the way, what does Secretary of State do? I should probably make that clear. What is their job? Secretary of State. What do they specifically deal with? Yeah. Exactly. Pretty much a Secretary of State deals with international or foreign affairs. So the Secretary of State, they deal with other states. So they deal with foreign or international issues. So if you don't know that, you should know that. By the way, who's our current Secretary of State? No, not she retired. Condoleezza Rice. No, that was the previous administration.
Oh, that helps. I know he's white.
Huh? Biden, he's vice president.
King.
McCain, no, he is Arizona Senator.
No, he's the guy who's like sits right.
John Kerry is our current Secretary of State. Secretary of Treasury. Who is that?
Madison.
Not Madison. Alexander Hamilton. He will be Secretary of Treasury. And Secretary of War is going to be, anyone remember from 8th grade? Henry Knox.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
So Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State. Alexander Hamilton, he's on the $20, oh no, he's on the $10 bill. And Henry Knox is Secretary of War because he knocks people out. Okay? Okay, so here's the question I want to ask right now. The president decided to make a cabinet. Now, remember when we made this new government, weren't we concerned that the president would have too much power, that he'd be able to do whatever he wanted? So what I want you guys to do right now is I passed out a list of presidential powers. So I want you guys to take a look at this worksheet I've given to you. And on the side that says excerpts from Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, I want you to tell me where it says here that the president has the power to make a cabinet. So I'm going to give you guys about 3-4 minutes. Read through presidential powers or wherever you want and see if you can tell me where it says the president has the power to make a cabinet. Because this is important. So take a look at this. Where does it say the president has the power to make a cabinet? Right? Does anywhere see anywhere where it says the president may create a cabinet according to the U.S. Constitution? It doesn't say it anywhere. Does it hint that anywhere that it might be able to do that? Is there anything that gives a clue that he might be able to have something close to that at all? Jardo?
Article 2, Section 2.
Okay.
I believe the first or the last sentence. One of those two.
Which one do you think?
The first one. Most likely.
He shall be the commander-in-chief?
No, second one.
This bullet right here? Okay. So he may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon subject relating to the duties of the respective offices. So he can ask for people's opinions. That's what it says. Yes.
He shall nominate by advice instead of the Senate. So technically he can choose who's in his cabinet, but the Senate has to approve of it.
Where does it say cabinet?
It doesn't, but like shall appoint ambassadors.
Ambassador goes to other countries.
Yeah, so essentially Secretary of State.
Secretary of State's not an ambassador. That's an ambassador. But what about Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of War? This is a concern for most people, folks, because does it say anywhere in the Constitution that the president has the power to make a cabinet? It does not. So already is Washington stretching the powers of his presidency? He's already saying, well, it says here that I can ask for people's opinions. I'm going to call that a cabinet. And I'm going to make that something that I get to do as president. And people complain like, no, you can't do that. It doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution you can make a cabinet. And he said, I think it's there. So all of a sudden you see this interpretation of a document. And what's Washington doing with this document? Is he trying to keep it strict, or is he trying to get as much out of it as he can? He's trying to stretch it, right? He's like, I think this means that you can have a cabinet. So this is something important that's going to keep happening. But again, you have a presidential cabinet that we like to call part of the unwritten Constitution. It's part of the unwritten Constitution because is it actually in the Constitution? No, it's not. But he's going to say, maybe it's a part of it. Maybe. There's George Washington. And already the people that did not want the Constitution, are they already pretty upset about this? They're like, no, that's what we were talking about. First it starts with the cabinet. Next he's going to like kill everyone. Okay, that's a natural step.
How do you have to be president?
That's a wonderful question. If you read Article 2, Section 1, under explanation of the Electoral College, how old do you have to be president? 35 years old. So I knew people would ask, so I provided that information for you, directly from the U.S. Constitution. Sir?
Does the Senate have the same power, like same as the power as president?
Huh?
Does the Senate have the same as much power as the president?
Does who?
Does the Senate
No.
have the same?
Different powers.
But like, are they kind of equal?
The Senate and the House of Representatives combined is considered equal to the office of the presidency. But they have different powers. In terms of power in general, they can't do one without the other, so they're all considered equal. Realistically, is the president more powerful? Yes. Because he's one guy with all that power versus 535 guys. Yes.
With like the he may require or he shall have power, etc., where it says he, like when it shows like the open bracket, close bracket, does that mean like it could also be she? So
No. The reason why I did that is this is actually just one paragraph. So the question that Omar is asking is, where is it? Oh, that's not it either. The reason why it says like he with the open brackets or the brackets is because it's actually supposed to be one paragraph. But I decided to separate it by clauses just to make it easier to read. So this is actually not supposed to be capital H. It's supposed to be just part of the next line. That's why it's done that way.
is that like you could also elect women?
Oh, no. Elect women? No. When we first wrote the Constitution? No way. Okay. Another thing that George Washington did that you guys already know is that he passed the Bill of Rights. So we already know the Bill of Rights, so just write it down. We're not going to spend time on it, but just be aware that he also passed the Bill of Rights, which is nice. Something else very important that George Washington did was he established the Judiciary Act of 1789. And what the Judiciary Act of 1789 did was that it established a federal court system. It established a federal court system and it appointed the Supreme Court justices. So it established the federal court system and it appointed the Supreme Court justices. Now let me explain what a federal court system means. In a federal court system, you have city courts, let's say district or state courts, district courts, appeals courts, federal court, then Supreme Court. And each of these courts also have appeals courts. There's like city court, city of appeals court, state appeals court, state Supreme Court, district of appeals court, and then you have federal court, federal appeals court, then Supreme Court. So you have different levels of courts. That's called a federal system. But at the top of that federal system is what? The Supreme Court. So here's my question. What problem were they trying to fix by creating a federal court system? Victoria? Sort of a right to a fair trial. That's definitely part of it, but the city courts can do that. District courts can do that. State courts can do that. Ultimately, the reason why they created the system, folks, is let's say it was simple. Local court, state court, federal court, Supreme Court, okay? The reason why they made this system in this order is that if it went Supreme Court, then federal court, then state court, then local court, and the local court had the last say, which one is considered to be the highest court? The local court. But if we put the Supreme Court up top, who has the final say? The Supreme Court. So what they're trying to say is in order to pass any laws or to pass any cases, it has to go through this process. And the final say is the Supreme Court. Because if it went Supreme Court and then state court, who has the last say? State court, and that's making the state court higher. And the reason why they did this is remember when like Texas and Virginia were not getting along? And so Virginia's court said one thing, but Texas court said another thing? And so they were never going to get along? How did we fix that problem? By saying the Supreme Court was higher. Does that make sense to everyone? Again, the basic idea that we were trying to establish was that the Supreme Court is higher to make sure there's a chain of command. We put the Supreme Court right on top, and we also make sure that these state disputes can be handled by a Supreme Court. So everyone good there? Yep. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways if you understand what I'm talking about here. Sweet. Be honest with those thumbs up, right? That's not like a fake thumbs up. Okay, so the first major issue then we're going to obviously deal with is the debt. And the debt from what? From the wars, which would have been amazingly more awesome had there been lightsabers. Unfortunately, that was not the case. But in the American Revolution, there was a massive debt that was incurred as part of the American Revolution, French Indian War, the Boston Tea Party, lots of debts. And here's what we owed, folks. The federal debt amounted to $54 million, and the state debt was $22 million. Now, he's like, that's not very much. Oh, yeah? Well, that's a total of $76 million. And today, you ask, that totals $5.77 trillion. Oh, that's a lot of money. Huh? Oh, we did pay it off. Oh, we did. 1808.
We're in debt right now.
Are we in debt like
16
right now?
trillion.
Yeah, we're in debt for like $16.5 trillion. But we're a new country. And we started off immediately with $5.77 trillion. How much weight does that bear down on you? Like, imagine you graduate from college and you owe $1 million. Like, oh my God. Like, you have all this weight on your shoulder. Like, you feel like you just can't do anything because of all of that financial pressure. That's what America had to deal with. They owed so much money. And so whose responsibility is it going to be to figure out how to pay off this debt? George Washington, yes. And whose advice will he seek? Alexander Hamilton, because he is the Secretary of the Treasury. So Alexander Hamilton's plan to pay off the debt. Let's talk about this guy. Alexander Hamilton's plan to pay off the debt. And again, folks, we asked Alexander Hamilton why? Because he is the, what's his job? Secretary of Treasury, right? He's a Treasury Secretary. Does anyone know who the Treasury Secretary is today? Come on, guys, this is important. This is your future. These are the guys determining what's happening to the economy.
How about the olives?
White guy again.
Oh my God.
Well, it was Timothy Geithner. Now it's Jack Lew. But he is white. He's Jewish. No, it's not like L-U-U. Not like, I was like, an Asian guy? How exciting. No, not an Asian guy. Jack Lew. I think it's like L-E-W-E. He's Jewish. Anyway, Alexander Hamilton's plan. The first thing that he did was he wrote some reports, because can you make any decisions without any research?
No.
Absolutely not. So he wrote first the report on public credit. And what the report on public credit said was that we should promote an economy that favored the rich. We should promote an economy that favored the rich. So the report on public credit said we should have an economy that favors the rich. Because the idea is that if we give money that promotes the rich or favors the rich, and we give this money and incentives to the rich, what will the rich do with all that money that they now have? They'll spend it, and maybe what else will they do with it? By spending that money, what are they going to do? Are they going to invest it? And by investing it, what are they going to be able to do that helps everyone else? They're not going to give us money. How? Why would they give us money? Through what? They're not just going to give us money. Like, here, money. Taxes? No, not taxes. Why do we give rich people tax breaks? Because what do they create? Jobs. So the argument is, let's give rich people money, and what those people will do is they will invest that money into things like what? Businesses, companies, and those businesses and companies will what? Create jobs. This, folks, is something called trickle-down effect.
So the rich just think they're being awesome.
Yeah, the rich feel amazing. They're like, hey, I'm creating jobs. But the assumption, though, is that you give, like, let's say you give a huge pool or bucket full of water to the rich, and they get this huge bucket full of water. And how much are we going to get on the bottom? We'll get the trickle, the drop. So slowly but surely, all that money that the rich got will slowly go down and it'll trickle to you guys. So like, they get $1 million and you guys get like $5. But hey, that's $5 you wouldn't have gotten without trickle-down effect. The other argument that's like Thomas Jefferson was making was, what? Why give money to the rich when you can take that money and do what with it? Give it to the poor. And then what will the poor do with it? They're not going to work with... No, you give them money. What do people do with money? They don't tax it. What do people do with money? They spend it. And when you buy things at stores, will they maybe run out of things?
Yeah.
And so what are they going to have to do?
More. Make more.
Make more. And if you need to make more, what is that going to create?
Jobs.
Jobs. There are two different ways to create jobs, folks. And even today we debate this, Republicans, Democrats. The idea that you give tax breaks to the rich, they'll create jobs with that money. Or you give money to the low-income people, they will take that money and spend it, create demand, and therefore create jobs as well. Does that make sense? Who's right? They're both right. But one is better than other from time to time, depending on the situation. They both work. They're not necessarily both effective all the time. But it's never good to do just one or the other. But anyway, that's what Hamilton's saying. Let's give money to the rich. It'll trickle down to the poor. Trickle-down effect. Report on manufacturers said that America should also stop being so agricultural, and we should become more what? What's the opposite of agricultural? Industrial. Very good. So he also recommends let's stop being so farmy. What if we became more industrial? Because who's becoming more industrial anyway? Britain. Britain's becoming industrial. They're making all the shirts and we have to buy it from them. But what if we made our own shirts? Genius. And we have the resources for it. We got the water. We've got the steam. Well, not yet. We don't have steam engine yet. But we got, like, the manpower. So that's his two reports. So ultimately what he decides to do is he says, here's what I want us to do. Part one of my plan is to assume the state debt. That's called assumption. He wants to assume the state debt. What does that mean, assume the state debt? I'm going to assume your debt. To take on the state's debt. So he wanted to assume the state debt, or take all the state's debt and make it federal debt. Okay, so assume means to take on the state's debt, and funding at par meant he would pay the state's debt plus interest. So one, he would assume the state's debt. That's called assumption. He would take on the state's debt, and he would fund that debt at par, funding at par, which means I'm going to pay what the states owe plus interest. So I'm going to pay you all the money that you're due because you lent that money for such a long time. Does that make sense to everyone? This idea of paying it plus interest? That's the basic idea. So some people loved this idea, others people hated this idea. And remember, folks, how much debt is he buying up here?
76.
Well, he's buying up $22 million of state debt. So remember, the federal debt used to be how much? 54. Now it's how much? 76. So he just went ahead and bought up $76 million in debt. Now people might think, you're crazy! Why would you want more debt for the federal government? But might some states be really happy that they no longer have any debt to be paid? You're like, yes! Yes! I love that idea. I love that you're buying all the debt. And specifically, which state might be really excited that all this debt that they incurred during the war is no longer there? Boston, Massachusetts. They had all this debt, and now all their debt is going to be shared by all the 13 states. Does that mean that their debt is gone completely? It means that they're going to share their debt now. Versus some other states like North Carolina says, wait. I only owe like $6 million of that $22 million. And now I have to pay the full $22 million? That seems unfair to me. So let me give you an example, folks. Oh yeah. Thomas Jefferson disagreed with this. Thomas Jefferson disagreed with all of this, everything. Thomas Jefferson disagreed with Alexander Hamilton about everything. And he said that this plan was unfair. Number one, it was unfair to who? The poor. It was also unfair to who? What about report on manufacturers? Unfair to farmers. But thirdly, he said it was unfair to states. Here's why. Let's assume that Massachusetts owed, I don't know, $100 million for the war, and Virginia only owed $20 million for the war. So, Massachusetts says, hey, that's not fair. We spent most of the war fighting it by ourselves. It's not our fault that the revolution happened in our state, but we fought and everyone benefited, so who should share this burden? Everyone should share the burden. But Virginia's like, no, 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 that's your burden. We're paying our burden. So Massachusetts thinks that's unfair. So if we go with funding at par, or if we go with assumption, what's going to happen is that Massachusetts and Virginia's debt will be combined. And now, how much will Massachusetts have to pay? 60. And how much will Virginia have to pay? 60. And who loves this idea? Massachusetts like, yes! Yes! Should I mention that Hamilton's from Massachusetts? It's probably important to mention. And Jefferson hates this idea because he's from Virginia. He's like, no, 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 no. That's not fair. We only owe 20. Now you're telling us we owe 60? That is not okay. Let me put it to you in a different example. Suppose I say, hey guys, you've been great. It's been a fantastic week. Let's all go to Outback Steakhouse. So we all go to Outback Steakhouse together. And we're all going to pay for, we're all going to get our own meal. So I decide, because I'm pretty baller, I'm going to get like a $500 steak at Outback Steakhouse. But you guys, you're on allowances, whatever. You each get like an $8 salad, right? Plus drinks, let's say 10 bucks. And I have a $500, steak. We have a conversation. We enjoy each other's company. At the very end of the meal, say, all right, guys, let's split the check evenly. Now, did you enjoy my company? Yes, you did. And I organized this whole thing. So didn't we all technically benefit from this meal? So why shouldn't you pay a portion? You got to smell it.
You got the taste of meat. We just got.
Yeah, but you got to enjoy it. You got to watch me eat it.
We got a salad.
But I organized it.
Did you enjoy
What?
watching us eat?
I did. I enjoyed the healthiness. I liked that I got to see greens alongside my red steak. I mean, it was wonderful. So we all enjoyed that experience. So I think it's fair that my $500 steak should cost me only, I don't know, $23. Where all of a sudden your $8 salads will cost you $23. Is that fair?
No.
Probably not. Well, it's not fair to you, but is it fair to me? I organized. You wouldn't be having this dinner if it wasn't for Mr. King. You owe me. You owe me.
Ever going out to dinner?
No one's ever going out to dinner with me? Likely not. But in any case, do you guys understand why Jefferson might be upset about this? Some states thought it was unfair that they had to pay for other states' debts. Hamilton, though, said, no, 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 no. That's not states' debts. That's everyone's debts. But here's the other thing. Hamilton saw this national debt that he just bought. He saw the national debt as a national blessing. This is the last thing we're going to do today. He saw the national debt as a national blessing. And here's why. Before, let's say you were the people that the states owed money to. Before, did you want to see the states succeed in order to get your money back? Guys, you lent money to these individual states. Did you want to see these states become successful so they would pay you back? Yeah. Of course you did. But now, these guys don't owe you money. The United States does. So who do you want to see succeed now? The United States. So the other reason why he believed the national debt was a national blessing is because it made Americans become invested in the success of America. It made Americans become invested in the success of America. One more time. It made Americans become invested in the success of America. Make sense? Okay, let me pass out chapter 10, folks. Have a wonderful day.